This is part 2 of The Old Man, a creepy story by Scott Medbury based on a real-life incident. If you haven't listened to part 1, you can find the links in the description.
I sat in my car, sipping coffee from a thermos and nibbling on sandwiches, my eyes glued to the supermarket entrance. I had been here for days, watching every face that passed by, hoping to catch a glimpse of the elderly couple that held the key to the mystery of my son's past life. On the 5th day, a Thursday exactly 4 weeks after the traumatic encounter in the cleaning aisle of the supermarket, I finally saw them. I'd arrived later than usual, as I'd had a doctor's appointment after dropping Tommy off, but I didn't want to skip even a day of my vigil, so I'd missed them arriving and entering the store. But there they were, the tall, thin man in the red plaid shirt and his irritable wife, pushing their cart towards an old pickup truck. My heart raced as I watched them load their groceries into the truck. I knew I had to follow them, but I couldn't risk being seen. As they climbed into the truck, I quickly started my engine and pulled out of the parking lot, keeping a safe distance behind them. The old pickup threaded its way through the streets, leading me to a quiet residential neighborhood on the outskirts of town. When they pulled into the driveway of a house, I couldn't help but stare. It was a distinctive mid-century modern home, with a combination of wood and stone features on the exterior. It was run down and the lawn was scrappy, but the architecture reminded me of something, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. As the couple began to unpack their groceries, I slowly drove past, my eyes fixed on the house number. Just as I was about to look away, the old woman suddenly turned, her gaze locking onto my car with a suspicious glare. My heart stopped, and I quickly pretended to answer my phone, keeping my face straight ahead, but watching her from behind my sunglasses. The old woman continued to stare in my direction, her eyes narrowed and her lips pursed. I could feel the sweat beading on my forehead, my hands shaking as I held the phone to my ear, pretending to have a conversation. "Please, please, please just look away," I silently begged. After what felt like an eternity, the old woman finally turned away, grabbing a bag of groceries and heading inside with her husband. I let out a sigh of relief, my heart still pounding in my chest. With the address now etched in my memory, I headed home, my mind racing. I couldn't believe I had forgotten to take a photo of the house, but the image of their distinctive home was burned into my brain. As I walked through the door, Tommy greeted me with a hug. I knew he had stopped talking about Sarah because it upset him so much, but I needed to know if the house I had seen was the one from his memories. "Hey, sweetie," I said, kneeling down to his level. "If Mommy asks you just one little question about Sarah, can I take you out for ice cream?" Tommy's eyes lit up at the mention of his favorite treat. "Okay, Mommy. What's the question?" I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Do you remember what the house looked like? The one where the bad man took her?" Tommy's brow furrowed. "Yes," he said emphatically. "It looked like the Brady Bunch house." My heart nearly stopped. The house I had seen was a dead ringer for the iconic TV home. Tommy's memories had led me right to it. Sarah liked the Brady Bunch? My mom said it was her favorite show when she was growing up. I liked it too. I shivered at my little boy innocently referring to his mom and speaking in the first person. "Thank you, sweetie," I said, hugging him tightly. "You did great. Now let's go get that ice cream." As we drove to the ice cream parlor, my mind was racing. I knew I had to find out if the couple had lived in that house long enough for it to be where Sarah was buried. The pieces of the puzzle were finally starting to fall into place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the verge of uncovering something truly horrifying. That night, after Tommy was tucked into bed, I sat down at my computer, determined to learn more about the house. I scoured Google and real estate websites, searching for any information I could find. After hours of digging, I finally struck gold. The house had last been sold in 1979, and it had never been available for rent that I could see, so it was logical to assume that they'd been there this whole time. Was the house Sarah's final resting place? My heart raced as I stared at the screen. the weight of my discovery settling heavily on my shoulders. If Sarah had been taken to that house, as Tommy's memories suggested, then the answers I sought might be hidden within its walls. But how could I be sure? And even if I was right, what could I do about it? The police had already made it clear that they wouldn't reopen the case based on my son's memories alone. As I sat there, grappling with the enormity of what I had uncovered, a chilling realization dawned on me. Now that I knew the truth, there was only one thing I could do. I needed to get into that house somehow. Both times I'd encountered the couple were on a Thursday, at around 11 a.m. Unless it was a coincidence, that was their regular weekly shopping date. I made plans to be at their home by 10 a.m. the following Thursday. With a bit of luck, I would see them leave and would then know I had around an hour and a half to look around. The intervening days were torturously slow before the morning finally arrived. After dropping Tommy off at school, I drove straight to the elderly couple's home and parked my car half a block away on their side of the street. I had a clear view of their driveway, but was far enough away to not raise suspicion. At 10:30 a.m. on the dot, I saw the front door open, and they walked out to the pickup. Even though I was well out of their proximity, I ducked down in my seat and peered over my dash until the old man had backed out and headed into town. With my heart pounding in my chest, I grabbed the small backpack I'd brought along and got out and walked to their house. I went to the front door and knocked. I did this for 2 reasons. 1, to make sure there was no one else home, and 2, in case any nosy neighbors were watching. No noise came from within the house, not even the bark of a dog, and looking around as I knocked again, I could see the trees and shrubs in the front yard blocked the view of the left-hand side of the house. Taking a deep breath, I stepped off the porch and went to the corner of the house. The garden was even more overgrown here, and it was dark and cool as I followed the side of the home towards the rear. The backyard was big and well shaded with tall fences, and once I was sure there was no guard dog, I approached the veranda. It looked like it had been added on long after the original construction of the house, but was in a ramshackle state. I tried the door. It was open, and I tentatively went inside. It was a musty-smelling room that looked like it hadn't been used for anything other than storage for a long time. There was nothing of interest, so I went to the door that led into the house. This one was locked. I looked through the grimy window into the kitchen. It was clean, but dated, and there was no sign of anything unusual. Feeling let down, doubt began to creep into my mind. What if I had the completely wrong idea about the whole thing? What if I was trespassing on a hunch that was nothing more than a kid's wild imaginings? I went back out into the sunshine. No, I couldn't be wrong. Too many things didn't add up. I decided to walk the length of the back wall of the house. That's when I saw it. A small casement window at ground level, partially obscured by overgrown shrubs. It looked like it might lead to the basement. I crouched down and peered through the grimy glass, my breath catching in my throat. The basement was dark, but once my eyes adjusted, I could make out what looked like a makeshift bedroom. There was a small bed pushed against the far wall. The walls were covered with old posters of pop stars, their edges curling with age. My mind raced as I took in the scene. Could this have been where Sarah was kept? The thought made my stomach churn. I knew I had to get inside for a closer look. I checked my watch. If the couple stuck to their usual schedule, I still had about an hour before they returned from their shopping trip. The window was slightly ajar, enough to get the fingers of both hands in, but it was stuck tight. I got back to my feet and looked around for something I could use to pry the window open. There was an old shed tucked away in the far corner. The shed was unlocked, but I grimaced when the hinges screamed in protest as I pulled the door open. It was dusty and almost empty, save for a short, rusted crowbar in the back corner. I took it back to the basement window. It was small, but I thought I might be able to squeeze through if I could pry it open. It worked, and I was able to pull the window out to a 90-degree angle. I shrugged off my backpack and placed it on the ground, slipping my cell phone into my jeans pocket. I lowered myself to my belly and put my feet through first. It was a tight fit, but I managed to wriggle my way through, only to fear I was stuck when I got to my hips. I persevered and finally landed with a thud on the timber floor. The basement was musty and dark, and I pulled out my phone, switching on the flashlight to see better. I made my way over to the bed, my heart racing as I took in the details up close. As I scanned the rest of the space, my eyes fell on a section of the floor where one of the boards was slightly raised on one side. I knelt down and ran my fingers along the edge and tried to pull it up, annoyed that I hadn't thought to throw the crowbar into the basement before I climbed in. I was about to get up again to look for something I could use when one of the nails gave way, and that edge of the floorboard popped up another half-inch. With trembling hands, I reached under it, and my fingers immediately encountered cold plastic. I paused and took a deep breath before probing further. Whatever was under the plastic felt firm, but malleable. My breath caught in my throat, and my eyes welled with tears as I realized what I had found, who I had found. I had to be sure, though. I scrambled back to my feet and began to look for an implement I could use to pry the boards up. That's when I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway.
If you'd like to hear more of this story, please let us know in the comments. We'd also love to hear of your opinions or experiences of reincarnation. For more creepy stories like this, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified.